At LSI, we don't just follow trends, we help shape the future. Welcome to Behind the Win, the podcast where we break down the biggest moves in tech, innovation, leadership, and government contracting. Here at LSI, we're bringing you exclusive conversations with the minds behind groundbreaking advancements, disruptive strategies, and industry-defining wins. From retail to tech, defense to government solutions. This is where you get the insights to stay ahead. Let's go behind the win.
Welcome to Behind the Win, the podcast that goes inside the minds of leaders shaping business, government, and innovation. Today's guest is Chip Laingen, Executive Director of Defense Alliance at LSI and a nationally recognized voice in defense innovation. A Navy veteran turned strategist, Chip has spent over 2 decades building one of the country's top innovation clusters. In this episode, we dive into how to build lasting partnerships, lead with purpose, and position small businesses at the forefront of national security. Chip, thanks for joining the podcast today. Excited to have you here. To start off, why don't you tell listeners a little bit about what Defense Alliance is?
Defense Alliance is a regional innovation cluster for the U.S. Small Business Administration. We started out in a small company called Minnesota Wire over 20 years ago. And we're surprised actually that we grew like we did. And it took a lot of hard work initially and then ultimately federal funding to get where we're at today. Our main charter is helping small businesses get defense contracts and federal contracts and grow their bottom line through commercialization of technology that primarily helps our warfighters and also can feed into the commercial market as well.
And what gave you the idea of this early on, right? And you can tell a little bit about the evolution too, where it did start as Minnesota Wire and then when LSI acquired it, right? And that, I mean, you paved the way here at LSI for these SBA RICs, these regional innovation clusters that we've gone after them with some partners like 47G or UAMI, and we get those now. And I think that's, I know that's a lot of because of the reputation that you've built with these and with SBA for sure.
Well, I'll give you I guess a somewhat disappointing answer in the sense that we created Defense Alliance almost by accident. And so the history of it really was I left the military after 21 years and ended up in a small manufacturing firm and realized after about 6 months there that, they do great work, make amazing things, but I wanted to be more than a wire salesman. And in the process, we were starting a defense division within this small company and learning all about the ins and outs of defense contracting, the challenges, the opportunities, the frustrations, the excitement, all of it, and realized that there was really nobody in the state or the region that was sharing lessons, helping other companies do that. So it really started, honestly, as an egalitarian effort to say, hey, we're learning all these cool things. Why don't we share this with fellow businesses? And then it became kind of a club, and then it became let's meet once a month, and then we gave it a website and a challenge coin, and we woke up one day and said, ooh, shoot, we built this big thing, and there's no way to maintain it. I screwed up the business model, I didn't come from business. I was a helicopter pilot. So we had produced a network of small firms that were eager to share lessons and grow technology. And we kind of done it by accident. And the purposeful nature of it came a little bit later when we realized, we don't have the bandwidth to support this. And that's when we started to chase, 2 things, really showcase the fact that we thought at the time a model for this type of effort. And secondly, chase federal funding to support it. And that's how we got to where we're at today.
And I know lots of people when we have talked about tech hubs or SBA RICs, right? How do you answer when they say, why does federal funding care if there's an association like this? Like, what does it bring to the warfighter? And maybe you can explain a little bit of that.
Well, for those of you that are in the GovCon process, you know how complicated, convoluted, confusing it is. The government,
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, the feds and our warriors they're in desperate need of technology and innovation constantly. And there's, as we know, RFPs all day long. You can go to sam.gov and you can find them. But step one is the easy step. Everything else after that becomes increasingly difficult. And the government really never figured out how to get out of its own way. And over the years has created a lot of complexity that either shouldn't be there or is there by necessity. But there's no way to navigate that. The government doesn't have the time to really explain that. And so the government really relies on partners, um, private, quasi-governmental, that help people navigate the process. And so things like regional innovation clusters like ourselves have grown up over the years because the government has kind of ceded that responsibility to others that are really more connected to industry, and especially at the local level. They say all politics is local. Well, all learning of this type of thing is local as well. And so if we're embedded in the community and understand the industries around us, the workforce around us, the local economy and what's possible, those are the things that the federal government can't do nationally and we can do locally and regionally.
Absolutely. And I think you guys feel this need too of like, we do this work at LSI in our regular core, capabilities, but small businesses can't afford what we do, right? So, and that's the thing with Apex accelerators, with these regional innovation clusters, is that you're helping those who have a killer technology, service, product, something that could get into the hands of the warfighter and our defense, agencies. But for someone who may not have the budget, and like you said, the knowledge, I think it's crazy. I've only been doing this for almost 5 years now. I knew nothing about government contracting, and it is, I always think it's like nothing that we do is proprietary, right? In the aspect of when we're helping them find government opportunities and to get in sam.gov, but it's so convoluted and complicated that that's what you guys do, is help them. It's like give them a Cliff Notes version and hey, here's what we've learned in best practices.
Yeah, and Sarah, I've been doing this for 21 years since I left the military, and I don't understand it either. So, 5 years, you've got a ways to go. It's not going to get all that better because it just changes all the time.
From your perspective, what do early stage defense tech companies need the most right now?
What do they need the most?
Yeah.
I I think there's a lot of internal things they have to kind of take on. So, they need to think about taking risks. They need to think about reaching out to people that can help them de-risk, like LSI, like the regional innovation clusters, like Apex. Because navigating the process is step one. Step two is getting noticed by the federal government or prime contractors, which is hard enough. It's a busy, chaotic world, and there's a lot of people out there. I have a lot of inventors or small businesses that start the conversation with, well, we're the only people that do fill in the blank. And it's almost never true, right? So the
Right.
government is seeing 50 companies like theirs. So even if they get noticed, then how do they stand out? And then the last part of that is, okay, so you got noticed. Now, what do you say when you finally get that recognition? You're in front of a buyer, either at an agency like the Office of Naval Research or in front of a prime contractor like RTX or something. You've got a nanosecond to make the right impression and to impress them to say, oh, I should learn more. It's that challenging of a market.
Absolutely. And I love that you say they not only know what your elevator pitch is, but what your differentiators, right? And
Yeah.
that's key. And that's something I think even LSI after 50 plus years has had to say, like, really nail that down into 30 seconds of what makes you different from someone else, of what
Yeah.
you can do. So great
And
advice.
a lot of times it's tough love too. I mean, we're
Yep.
here to support, we're here to connect, we're here to provide them with resources. I mean, LSI has such an incredible bench of subject matter experts. And so we can provide all of that oftentimes at minimal cost, especially with a cluster type effort. But sometimes it's just they need validation, number one. Am I doing
Yeah.
the right thing? Should I be chasing this market? And then number two, sometimes after an initial interview and we learn how the company does business, how they communicate, what they're trying to protect or not protect, sometimes it's tough love and we say, you're not ready for this. They need people to say, sorry, but you're missing whatever it is, cybersecurity protection, you're missing the ability to truly speak to this government customer in a language they understand, you're missing marketing materials. And it's kind of, I always say it's kind of like the Marine Corps recruiting method. If you're familiar with military recruiting, all the services say, oh, free education, here's some cool hats at our booth. It's all about what we can give you. The Marine Corps is different. It's tough love. The Marine Corps is the
Hmm.
only service that says, when a teenager walks up to the booth at a state fair or something, they say, you're not good enough for us. And there's something in their mind. They say, wait a minute, yes, I am. And there's a pull-up bar. Okay, prove it. So we do a little bit of that with small business too. We use that method to say, no, you're not good enough. And here's how you can improve.
But I think that that's great because we talk about that a lot here lately. Whether we're selling clients a pipeline or funds, and I always say to our folks, right, like take a step back. If they're not ready to go after this, I know this is a sell loss for us, but sometimes that's okay. Like, hey guys, you need another 6 months. You need to vet your capabilities out a little bit more. You're not really fully, out of the R&D, whatever it is. But I think telling people no sometimes is just as valuable as, is way more valuable than signing them up and letting them flail for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And you started that conversation with what do small businesses need right now, and I just thought of this too. Is oftentimes they don't bring a small business doesn't bring the entire game to the fight. So they may make the best battery that's ever been made. Okay, but what about the inverter? What about the knowledge of the system?
Yep,
You're not bringing partners to the game, and we can help people do that. And so there's an awareness of the resources they need. They may not have the ability to be market agile, that they may not have that sense of awareness of how complicated this market is. And we can provide kind of that coaching to do that. The other thing I'd say is if you're not, if you're a small business in technology of any kind and you're not using AI right now on a daily basis, you're
absolutely.
behind. You're way behind. I mean, and I could barely spell it last year. And now we've studied it for a year for the Small Business Administration. We just wrapped up a
Yep.
year-long study on AI. And it's just painfully obvious now the companies that are succeeding in the market are using AI at the individual level for productivity. And they're starting to use it at the enterprise level to do market readiness, market assessments, searching for partners. It's really it's a tool they have to use right now.
Couldn't agree more. And I do love that you said it again too, kind of about the educating, is also small businesses, and that's such a great point, is they just come in and I love people that have big ideas, but sometimes
Yes.
that I will say to this day to anyone, I will take being a sub over a prime any day. I have less liability, less
Yeah.
responsibility, and I can operate and still make great, bring in a good ROI. But they have to be able to, like you said, eat that elephant one bite at a time, not just you're
Yeah.
going to come in and, hey, we're going to land this prime spot immediately.
Yeah, and it's really a balance too. And I thought of this the other day. I teach at the university level in graduate programs, and I do the capstone programs. And a lot of times these students will come to me with this huge grand idea to change the world. And you don't want them to lose that either. You want
Hmm.
them to have that kind of
Right.
childlike enthusiasm and excitement,
Temper
like
it.
I've got the best coffee cup in the world and DOD needs this, right?
Yeah,
And it may be true, and you don't want them to lose that excitement. So you have to coach that and enable that, keep them excited, but also come in from the other side and say, okay, that's cool, but maybe focus on just a part of that first. And, keep that vision, but here's how you're going to get there over the long term.
absolutely. Chip, you served as a Navy pilot. How did your military background shape your leadership approach today?
Yeah, so it's interesting. When I was growing up, that's all I wanted to do was fly aircraft. Um, I wanted to fly P3s, which way back was the maritime patrol aircraft. And I got into flight school for the Navy and they must have thought I said H3s instead of P3s, so I ended up in helicopters. But I quickly found out that as exciting as flying is, especially in the Navy, it's more of a trade. It's just something that you happen to do as an officer. Um, in the Navy, especially, the culture is, yes, go and do that, but more importantly, you're an officer first, and it's about servant leadership and making sure that your sailors can get the mission done. And that really stuck with me right off the bat, and it was reinforced continuously for the 21 years that I was in. So flying was second, being an officer was first. And I learned some things about people, obviously, and human nature is immutable. And when I left, I went to that small company in St. Paul. The CEO said, "Well, you're used to just ordering people around and things happen." And it dawned on me that a lot of times civilians think that about the military, and to some degree, it's true. But at the end of the day, sailors, soldiers, airmen, Marines, they're human beings too, and they want to be led. They want to be influenced. You can order them to take the hill, but they may not do it very well if you haven't built that level of trust and given them the resources they need to succeed. And business is no different. If you've got a line worker, like an E3 in the military, they are the most important person in the fight by far. And the more senior you get, in some ways, you become less and less important, and your entire job should be supporting those people that are actually doing the fight or making that widget on the line. So that was number one, is just human nature is what it is, doesn't matter where you are, and leadership matters, especially servant leadership. The other thing too, coming from aviation, was we had an expression that was everything is broken all the time. And that was true on warships too. Everything's broken all the time. It's equipment, it's complicated, it's in a saltwater environment, nothing ever works. And so that kind of got me thinking about that continuous improvement process where you have to be thinking about what's not just continuous improvement, but what's the alternative if one aircraft is down or one of the pumps is down on the ship? Have you thought about the way out? And so you're constantly thinking about ensuring the mission gets done at all costs, because there's always a way if you've planned for it.
Absolutely. And I love that, you say that, because we always hear kind of these, I don't know if you call them influencers or, leadership styles that say, if you have a plan B, that's saying your plan A is going to fail. And I'm like, bullshit. That's not what that means.
Yeah.
That means that right? We've done a risk assessment. We have a risk appetite framework. We understand what we're willing to risk and then what we're going to do to mitigate that. And so, couldn't agree with you more on that. I love that.
That's another thing LSI is really good at, is making people that are chasing government contract work, making them aware of the risks. We talked about a little bit about what, making sure your eyes are wide open, but risk assessment is huge. One of the things, back to the service, on my first aircraft commander board in the Navy, where it's like a 4-hour board with senior officers, and they pepper you with questions about flight safety and operations and weapons, and just to see if you can sign for the aircraft. It's nerve-wracking. And I was so proud of myself. I did an amazing job, I thought. And I got to the very end, the last question from the captain was, what's that little bump on your wings? And so naval aviators wear gold wings. And if you look at the anchor in the middle, there's a little bump on the fluke, the anchor fluke. And I'd never thought about it before. I thought it was an imperfection in the minting of the wings. And he said, "What is that?" And I said, "I don't know, it's a bump." And he said, "That's a becket." And if you look up the word becket, in the days of sailing ships, when they threw an anchor over the side, there was a small hole in one of the flukes. In this case, it's a bump in the wings, but in reality, it's a hole. And you tie a rope through it. And in case the chain breaks, you still have a way to pull the anchor back up.
Oh, wow.
And he says, that's put on your wings to remind you that there's always a way out, but you have to think about the risks and think about that way out before you get there. And I was like, oh man, you're going to fail me, but I passed anyways.
That's awesome. I did not know that. You've carried that sense of service into your work with small businesses and economic development. Why has that remained central to your mission?
Well, again, back to the people, it's like nothing gets done with equipment, nothing gets done with policy, nothing gets done with regulations, nothing gets done with contracts. It's all people. And it sounds obvious, but if that's not your number one focus in everything that you do in the government service world, you're just not going to succeed. Again, you can have the most amazing invention in the world, unless you know where it fits, how to sell it, uh, how the government contracting system works. Um, you're just not going to succeed. And so, service is the way to do that. You got to serve your employees so they understand that they have the resources. And most of all, you have to serve the customer. If you don't understand where that ultimate coffee cup is being used in the field, and the fact that it has to be soldier proof, it has to be unbreakable. If you haven't done your due diligence as a servant leader for your customers, you're just not going to succeed. It doesn't matter how good the product is.
Couldn't agree more. There's a lot of talk about veteran support out there. We hear it all the time, but you've focused on real resources. So what does meaningful support actually look like?
For veterans, somebody once told me that as a veteran, you could probably live for free in this country. The amount of support services for veterans is off the charts, not just from the government, but from community services, state services. If you knew about them all, you could probably live for free. But the thing about veterans is they don't want stuff. They want to continue their
Purpose.
service.
Yep.
Yeah, they want a sense of purpose. I mean, it's no different than anybody. But veterans especially have that deep-rooted sense of purpose, discipline, service. They want to give back. And it's almost, I don't want to overstate this, but it's almost insulting if we're just trying to give them stuff, right? Give them an opportunity, hire them. That's a real resource, right? And because they are amazing resources in themselves. So again, understand them, honor their service, and hire them because they're just amazing, amazing human beings.
Absolutely. How do you stay grounded in purpose when playing the long game, especially in the national security space?
Impact what you can. If you think of the national security space, that's a big, what is that? That's a big amorphous definitional thing.
Right.
Um, but you do as an individual or as a firm bring something to the fight. Bring what you can, bring what's achievable, and don't be disappointed by the system too, which is real easy. We talked earlier about the complexity of government contracting. It's very easy to get discouraged. But I think I worked for a Secretary of the Navy once who said, as I was expressing some frustrations, he said, "Chip, you've got to get over this. We're going to do the American thing. We're probably not going to do the right thing." And he said, every now and then those two things coincide. But in terms of government contracting, again, the national security realm, it's not a perfect system. And if you're looking for perfection, you're in the wrong business.
So to add on to that a little bit is, you've said this before, that defense innovation isn't just about tech, it's about people, policy, and positioning. And I love that, but can you unpack that a little bit?
So people policy, did I say that?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'll save the people thing for last because that's the most important. But so policy
Okay.
wise, again, this kind of plays on what we just talked about is uh, policy that drives government contracting and defense innovation is not logical, right? There's a lot of policies that have been put in place, some for good reasons, some more questionable, but they exist, and you have to navigate within that system. So understanding the policies, things like, guess what? Now there's a new requirement, CMMC, cybersecurity requirements,
Yep.
level 3 required now for all defense contractors. Some would argue that it's not required yet. I argue that it is. It absolutely is if you want to be taken seriously. That's a policy. You've got to understand that, got to navigate within that. Positioning, knowing where your technology fits or if it fits at all. is huge. And again, when people say, I'm the only AI service company that can do, real-time maintenance on F-35s with AI, not true. It's just not true. So how do you position your capability with your strengths within a system where it makes sense for your particular technology? You've got to understand that. And then, you know, obviously people is the biggest part of that, and defense innovation is you're making things for people that arguably are the most committed people on earth, and that's people that fight for us. And if you're not as committed as they are to your piece of the mission, however small it is, you're not thinking about it correctly. So think about their sacrifice, and find a way to fit into the system in a way that you can understand the policy, position yourself well, and be as committed as the people that you serve.
That's great. And I think in different landscapes, political landscapes, right, people get, businesses get a little antsy. And so with you saying that, I feel like that's saying to them, and we try to say that a lot to even our clients today, is you got to be able to pivot, right? Is because like you
Yeah.
said, it's not, it doesn't make sense. The policy isn't, it doesn't exactly line up with the way we should do it, or, but it's being able to pivot, and that you can, be creative in how what you're offering can help them, right? You may not have built
Yes.
your offering or what you have exactly for that purpose, but where can you find of like why that purpose should care what you're doing?
Yeah. That reminds me too of another thought I always have, and that is I see a lot of small companies that get really frustrated because they're making something very important or providing a service that's very important, but they keep asking for what are the requirements. So they're asking the Army for what are the requirements for corrosion control in a M777 howitzer. I mean, it's amazing how in the weeds we get on stuff. And
Yep.
they'll search for days, weeks, months, years trying to figure out what does the Army want. The Army doesn't know what it wants. They don't. I mean, if you can talk to an actual soldier that fires that gun, he can probably tell you,
Yep.
but he doesn't have the power. So a lot of times the power resides with a small business that, number one, takes a risk and says, you know what, I don't have all the information, but I know what I make is damn good. And I believe that we're going to be the best corrosion protection for that piece of equipment. And I'm going to tell the Army what their new requirements are. And it's amazing. It's depending how you present it, of course. You got to be respectful and operate,
Sure.
with their language. But oftentimes you can come to a buyer and say, here's what we can offer. Number one, we've heard what your frustrations are. We've done our homework. And we can offer you this level of protection. And we think it's the best in the market and all that stuff. But I see a lot of companies that waste a lot of time just fishing around, trying to get the perfect information. It's not there. They don't know.
Agreed. And I think when you say too that when I came into this, again, we talk about 5 years ago, and I would hear people saying, well, let's tell them what we think that those requirements are, how it should, operate, or how this program should run. And I'm like, us tell them, their agencies, I'm sure they already know that. And no, they actually don't.
You know.
They have so much other, they have so much other shit going on. No, they're like, hey, tell us how you think it should. Then we'll tweak it. And being in my position now, that's so much better, is I want, come to me with a plan or an idea or something, and let me say, okay, I love that, but like, let's do this or X, Y, and Z. And then then we can go with it, So, such great advice.
There's an analogy in the cluster system too. Back when they started creating these clusters, they didn't know what they were doing. They had this vague theory from somebody at Harvard that wrote a paper on technology clusters. But when they put out the solicitation, it was as vague as the day is long, because they didn't know what they were looking for. And in that context, or a small company that's doing technology, I see that as opportunity. Man, I
Yep.
mean, you bring innovation to that problem set and tell them what a regional innovation cluster should look like and do. And it's amazing sometimes. It's like, yeah, that's what we meant. That's great. Let's do that.
Yep. And because of the way people like you think like that, I think that's what makes what we do at LSI so much different. And that's our differentiator, because I say the same thing when they don't give me a budget. I'm like, let me tell them the budget. Let
Right,
me tell
right.
them what they should spend.
Yeah.
I don't like, um, we could go back and forth on that, but I do love when it's a little bit vague. Let us put our own little spin on it for
Yeah,
sure. So
yeah. Gives you a chance to be creative.
there's growing recognition of small businesses' role in strategic deterrence. What makes them uniquely positioned to compete in a global defense landscape?
Well, I get in trouble when I say this sometimes, so I'm careful where I say it. But the
Don't be
defense
careful.
the defense prime contractors, they don't innovate. They just don't. They acquire innovation, right? Their
Yep.
supply chain is where they get the innovation. And where is that from? That's from small business. I mean, Boeing, Raytheon, United Defense, whatever all the prime players, they bolt stuff together. And that's a super important role, obviously, right? Just maintaining supply chains are a nightmare. LSI knows that. It's the specialty and how much that goes into that. Um, but the innovation, the true innovation comes from small business. And the defense challenge for us now is change is happening faster. In fact, we always said that before, innovation's moving fast and you have to move fast. But now it's becoming exponential and largely because of AI. And the only way you're going to get innovation into defense is through small businesses. That's the number one thing they bring to the table. And speed. So you bring speed and the ability to risk, bring that to the prime contractors and the major agencies, and the sky's the limit.
And small businesses are positioned. And I think when people hear small businesses, this doesn't just mean it's a company that's making 500K a year, right? I know what our revenue is, and we're still considered a small business with an
Yeah,
entity. And so that can be a lot. It depends on the number of employees, et cetera. So they have less red tape. And so when you say that small business, and they can be quicker, right? And quicker to market because they don't have all of that bureaucracy and overhead
absolutely.
like the big primes do, for sure.
Yeah.
So I know you guys have had lots of successes, and we see quarterly reports. We see everything at Defense Alliance, and it's amazing. Can you share one of your most recent or a success story from Defense Alliance that, demonstrates kind of everything that we've talked about in action?
So my favorite one is one we just reported to the SBA last quarter. And it's a small business in Fargo, North Dakota, a woman-owned small business they started making UAVs actually almost 20 years ago. And you can imagine 20 years ago being a small business in Fargo. It's hard enough now, but 20 years ago it was even more than
Sure.
they were. And they just couldn't get noticed, and they didn't know how to sell their product into the DoD. And somehow they found us. There was actually a fledgling Dakota Defense Alliance for a while that we helped start, and they pointed them to us. This is a company called Packet Digital in Fargo, and the reason I'm going to them is because it reinforces that success in this market is, generally speaking, a long-term play. To be
Marathon.
truly successful, it's a marathon,
Yep.
yeah. And they represented the patience, the diligence, the excellence over 20 years to get where they're at now. So again, they started out as a little UAV manufacturer, didn't get much traction, but they were also at the same time trying to figure out how to make sure their aircraft remained aloft longer, and they were battery powered. And so they started figuring out a way to save battery power through a chip. That became the success that they have today, not just the battery, but the ability to make it last longer. And once they figured that out, and then we figured that out as a cluster to say, oh, okay, here's how you position that into the DoD, then it just exploded. Now they're building I forget what it is, $75 million purpose-built factory in Fargo just to keep up with one service's demand. That's the Navy for
Wow.
these high-end batteries. And they're doing stuff with batteries and inverter systems and these power-saving chips that China can only dream about. And again, just a little firm in the middle of nowhere. Now it's woman-owned business that is just killing it. But she's working hard, and they're all working hard. I mean, they don't let up. It's 7 days a week. They're in Fargo going, hey, we're over here.
Yeah.
It's hard to get noticed. And so we brought the ability to, help them get noticed at a regional level and now at the national level. And they're just doing amazing work.
That's fantastic. And just thinking of the workforce development they've brought to that area, building a bigger plant. I mean, everything that they've done to not just put Fargo on the map, but just, and I do love that you say it's a marathon because we tell people that, right? It's not for the faint of heart. There's not just sprints. We can find quick wins in things that we do, but that's, it is this marathon, this long haul that you've got to be in it for.
Yep.
What advice would you give to early stage defense companies navigating federal procurement for their very first time?
Don't be scared of it. Don't try to understand everything right away. If you look at that market as one that's potentially lucrative for you as a business, and you can probably discern that pretty quickly, then you dive in, all of a sudden you might go, oh crap, I got to do all this accounting and cybersecurity. I've got to understand the vagaries of the market. This might get funded, this might not get funded, depending on the political situation. That's good. Learn that stuff, but don't let it scare you away unless you truly can't navigate those things. Jump in the game, make some mistakes. Yes, you can make mistakes. You can get audited by the Defense Contract Audit Agency and get spanked for it. But again, if they're producing something they need, it's going to be just fine unless there's, something nefarious that you've done behind the scenes. But if you're being honest about trying to navigate the system, don't be scared by mistakes that you're inevitably going to make.
What would you hope is one takeaway, listeners remember from this conversation today?
Yeah, I go back to leadership. It's the overlay for everything. We get so wrapped up in our business with defense technology innovation and the commercialization process and protecting our inventions with patents and all the stuff that goes into that stuff. And it's all important. But if you don't have that layer of informed servant leadership that is helping your people be committed, giving them the resources they need to produce for our warriors, none of it matters. Along with everything is broken all the time. We always said in the military, everybody is important all the time. We said that in our squadron. It wasn't just the pilots. It's everybody all the time. The maintainers, the contract workers, the spouse club. Everybody's important. And if you're not paying attention to every part of that chain, that supply chain, you're just not going to succeed.
Absolutely. And finally, what's one thing a small business could do today to move the needle on their work in this national security space? And maybe that's just somebody that's not just starting up, right? Starting up, you're saying, don't be scared, educate yourself, try and fail. Someone who's already in it, what could they do today to move that needle?
I'll give you two things.
Okay.
Number one, fight to get noticed. Because yes, in fact, you may make the best coffee cup that's ever been put into the field. But again, nobody cares until they care. And they're not going to care until you get noticed and you've got to fight. It doesn't matter if you're in Fargo or even in Norfolk, Virginia, where there is a really mature defense ecosystem and places in between, you still have to fight to get noticed. And you've got to be ready for the rejection and then turn that around, find out why they rejected you and get back to the fight if you truly believe you have the right thing. The other thing is, and this is related, back to we're going to do the American thing, not the right thing. Let go of logic. Don't try to understand the defense contracting system to its entirety. Right?
So true.
Don't be so frustrated. It's like, I have the best coffee cup in the world. Why won't they buy it? It's not logical. Don't think of it that way, right? Understand the system, understand the language, and fight to get noticed, and you'll get there.
If folks are interested or want to learn more about Defense Alliance, where can they go today to see that information? So
defensealliance.com, obviously, we have a website, and it's fairly up to date. We love to have people come to our events. We do events in theory once a quarter. We end up doing 6 or 7 a year. Some are virtual, open to anybody. You can just go to our website to find our webinars. And we have a bank of webinars on there too, so you can look back and see previous examples of those. And then we have an industry brief that goes out once a month. It's an electronic newsletter like every organization has. It goes out to 4,000 emails in 38 states. And it's a good bank of information to try to understand the defense industry. So if somebody wants to be on that list service, they can just email us through the Defense Alliance website and we'll get you signed up for that.
That's great. Chip, thanks for joining us today. We appreciate everything that you guys are doing, everything that you've taught us, and just your background and your leadership and your advice. We pull you in on our big stuff here, and there's a reason for that. And so I loved having you part of this conversation today. So thanks for being on.
Thanks, Sari, and we've been admiring your leadership as well. You're a mentor for us too. So keep up the great work.
Thank you.